Hi, and welcome everyone to this afternoon's conversation with former panelists of the Rasmussen Foundation's Individual Artist Award program. And we're so thrilled to be able to welcome you into this virtual space and panelists from all over the nation to join in conversation and discussion about this process of applying to the Rasmussen Foundation Individual Artist Award program, but also applications and panels in general. So that will be the meat of our conversation today. Before we get started and I introduce our panelists, I want to invite us into a moment of land acknowledgement. So wherever you are, I'd like you to find your 2 feet on the floor and take a moment to feel connected beneath all the supports of the structure or building that you're in, all the way down to the earth that supports that space. And take time to honor and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of the place where you are. For me, here in Anchorage at the Anchorage Museum, it's the Eklutna Dena'ina people who've stewarded these lands for thousands of years. And I acknowledge their past, present, and future stewardship of this place that allows me to live and work and gather with others and share in its beauty. Thank you. So feel free. I'll go over some housekeeping notes in a moment too after I introduce our panelists. But as I'm opening things up, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, if you're not one of the panelists, I welcome you to do so. So I'm going to briefly read some bios. We have in the wings Cody Carver, my colleague, who is going to pop some of those bios in the chat so you can read along if you'd like. And Cody is our maestro of the Crowdcast platform today. So if you're having trouble with the platform, feel free to put those issues in the chat and we'll attend to them as best we can to help support you having a good experience with us this afternoon. So I'm glad to introduce our 3 panelists. Reina Leon is joining us from Philadelphia today. She's the author of 3 collections of poetry, The Canticle of Idols, Boogeyman Dawn, and Sombra, Dislocate, and the chapbooks Profeta Without Refuge and Arieto Ta'atabe, Essays on the Mothering Self. Her 4th collection, Black Godmother, This Body, will come out from Black Freighter Press in 2022. And she's currently working on a multi-genre exploration of Blackness in color, academia, and art as resistance and the preservation of a whole and humanized spirit. She is a founding editor of the Acentos Review, and she educates our present and future agitators and educators as full professor of education. Jibs Cameron is joining us from LA. Her multimedia performance work as Alter Ego Dynasty Handbag has spanned over 15 years and been presented at arts venues such as the New Museum of Contemporary Art, the Broad Museum, the Hammer Museum, Red Cat, the Kitchen, BAM, and Centre Pompidou, among others. She has written and produced numerous performance pieces, dozens of video works, and 2 albums of original music. She produces and hosts Weirdo Night, a monthly comedy and performance event in LA, and she's a 2020 Creative Capital Grant awardee and a 2021 United States Artists Award recipient. She recently sold a short series to FX Network titled Garbage Castle, which is on hold due to COVID, and her film Weirdo Night, directed by Mariah Garnett, is a 2021 Sundance Film Festival selection. And then last but certainly not least, we have F. Javier Torres Campos joining us from Brooklyn. He is currently director of Thriving Cultures at CERDNA, overseeing a portfolio dedicated to investing in Black, Indigenous, and people of color, to prototype racially just systems and structures with their communities and build a more just world. Javier's career has been committed to supporting power building and cultural leadership as an important lever of many for transformative change. Prior to CERDNA, Javier was the director of national grant making at Art Place, and he built comprehensive sets of demonstrations of projects that illustrate the many ways in which arts and culture can strengthen the processes and outcomes and planning of the development field. Before his time at Art Place, he was Senior Program Officer for Arts and Culture at the Boston Foundation and spent 6 years prior as the Director of Villa Victoria Center for the Arts. He was a founding member of the Constellations Fund and currently serves as a funding and evaluation partner for the Mosaic Fund and the network at the New York Community Trust. So we're so thrilled to have this illustrious group of folks to chat today. I'm going to go over some quick housekeeping notes just regarding our conversation today. So I've got my eyes on the chat. There's also an ask a question function. We'd encourage you to put your questions there as they come up in our conversation. I'm going to seed us with some questions to get you started, but to get our conversation started, but don't hesitate to pop questions into that Q&A section throughout, and we'll monitor them. This will run just probably around 60-ish, a little over maybe minutes, depending on Q&A. And as we're going, we'll be in more organic conversation, but again, feel free to add thoughts or comments as well in the chat or questions in the Q&A. I think with that, I don't have any other housekeeping notes, so I'll go ahead and get us started. I thought a nice way to get us started for today's conversation would just be to have each one of you all share a little bit about your background and relationship to artist application review panels, whether as an artist and a panelist or in different capacities that you've been in relationship to panels, as a grant maker in different capacities, and just share a little bit about that. It gives us also a moment to put those illustrious bios with faces. Thanks. Raina, would you get us started?
Gotta tag that unmute. So my work has been often in the space of evaluating applications as well as submissions for residencies, for grants, as well as just as an editor for the Incentives Review. And I have always loved the process of being changed bodily by how I learn about someone's work and get deeply immersed in their work. And so I think it's less about the name of this or the name of that, but rather the dedication of the people assembled for reading intently and delighting in the step that artist has taken in saying, I am an artist and I want to my work to be reviewed for this thing. Whether it is submission, whether it is a residency, whether it is a fellowship. And so I think that's what I'll offer initially, is like an initial introduction to the panelist perspective of, you don't have to be afraid of the folks on the other side that they're judging you in a negative way, like, oh, that you don't belong. Rather, you belong. We are artists together. And thank you so much for the honor of being able to read your work. And at least that's how I have approached my work in connection with others, of reviewing what folks offer to share.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Javier.
Okay, hi, I'm Jibs. Excuse my casual posture. I'm having a neck issue today, so I'm just trying to do. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm just like, I was trying not to do this from my bed. But yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. It's so nice to see you all again, and being on the Rasmussen panel was really great this year. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I mean, I just echo what Raina said in some ways. Like, it took me a long time to get up the courage to ask for what I need as an artist, to put thought into getting proper documentation. It was a lot of like self-worth work to even be brave enough to start applying for things, and feeling like I had, imposter syndrome at residencies, feeling like they made a clerical error and I was going to get like kicked out at some point. But when I started to work on the other side of things, I realized that it was a far more generous relationship. And it wasn't just like some sort of like big brother, like stamp of like, no, yes, or it was actually people really considering things and sharing information and really trying to make decisions based on, you know, I think like the times that I've not gotten awards or residencies and gotten feedback, most of the time it's been really helpful. And also like, if I could be humble enough to just listen and say, oh yeah, maybe this project isn't quite ready for, and it is like what you said, like real folks on the other side trying to make decisions of who they think might be best suited for it, and rather than like uh no, you suck, like there's none of that going on. So that's sort of my experience with it. And yeah, and I also really enjoy reading people and getting excited about people, and what Raina said, just having that being a real honor to like look at people's work and stuff. So that's where I'm at with it. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
So excited to be here with you all today. I'm Javier. I want to just agree at first with everything that Reina and Jibs have said. I also want to share a little bit that my experience has been both in designing processes and sort of being part of a panel and arbitrating. Maybe thinking a little bit more upstream and giving some credence to the amazing Rasmussen team. It's difficult to design for limited resources. It's difficult to design and check yourself all of the time for clarity of language and intention and how things might be interpreted or understood. I think one of the things that I deeply appreciated about the Rasmussen process is that they always brought us back to context. They always reminded us that Alaska is a drastically different context than where most of us were calling in from or reviewing from, and that we needed to understand the nuance of the work and the difficulty and sort of additional challenges and costs that come with the work in the really diverse, vibrant, and sometimes really isolated communities that exist across Alaska. And then, yeah, I just want to echo that while there are criteria and guidelines, panel processes are human and imperfect. And I just want to give credence to the fact that the humans that come to the table, I've always experienced, but definitely felt this way in the Rasmussen process, are grappling with these difficult recommendations. And feel very deeply in the moments where we need to make decisions of one versus the 14 or the 15 that we love, because it's the resources that are left. And then identifying ways to communicate to you all when we have to say a no, that you're amazing, that you're wonderful, that you're great at your work, that you need to just keep going. And if there are areas for growth and improvement, I think as Jibs was saying, that we all need to be humble, not just in our artistic practice, but really in the way that we do all of our work, that there's opportunity for growth. And, last but not least, unfortunately, sometimes, and we'll probably dive into this, and this might be a segue to some of the next questions, Hollis, following instructions is key, because sometimes the work is amazing and it just comes down to a split of a hair where somebody has either missed an instruction, ignored an instruction, or misunderstood an instruction that sometimes is the deciding factor of who gets a yes and who gets a no. And then finally, just closing with, and to ensure that you understand all the instructions, whether it's with Rasmussen or anyone, know that there's always an opportunity to reach out to staff for clarification. I know for a fact that Rasmussen spent hours and hours supporting artists who wanted to apply. And so to Jib's comment, I think we all sometimes feel imposter syndrome, no matter what we're doing. And just to trust that you have a purpose and that it's okay to ask for help. And that it's only going to make your work stronger as you think about continuing to apply to others. So I'll stop there for now.
So many words of wisdom already. I just wanted to reveal that for those tuning in, that I am actually, part of my story of coming to Alaska is being a panelist for the Rasmussen Individual Artist Award Foundation, and so that grant making process. And so I also have some perspective here, and I really am appreciating all of the thoughts that are being offered up. I had kind of one more background question on the nitty gritty of panels I thought might be useful to talk about, which is just, as a panelist, how do you approach, you get this packet of maybe hundreds sometimes, depending on the scale, of different artists to look at, or dozens of different artists to look at. How do you start? How do you approach looking at an artist packet that's been submitted? Because I think that can be helpful if you've never been on the panel side, to understand, well, how do different people approach looking at my work as it's presented? Because as an artist, you're presenting a variety of things: something written, probably a CV, work samples, maybe other kinds of budgets and documentation as well. If anyone wants to jump in.
I can jump in. So I was sharing with Hollis the full transparency about my situation, my family. Inevitably, my children will find me, to hear my voice, and they find me in the space. And I share that, one, to give you context for my participation today, but also to give you context for how I approach the work, right? I am a mother of two littles who are 3 and 18 months. Wow. And so I can't focus on work while they are climbing on me, over me, and so on. And so my approach to the work is after caregiving, after the full work day, where there's quiet in the dream time of the world, right? And so really digging into all the components of someone's work in that packet, the artist statement and the proposal and the work sample, and approaching it with such wonder. Like I get ready. I set a vibe. I got like a humidifier with essential oils going. I got my coffee. I'm ready to just be in the state of wonder, and spending a good amount of time reading and then rereading, and going through to provide also that feedback. And I love that Javier also spoke about feedback, because I was sharing with Hollis before around how prepared I felt as a panelist by the Rasmussen Foundation to provide good feedback.
That's right.
To provide feedback that will nurture that relationship of the artist, whether selected or not. And recognizing that part of the process of the panel ultimately is this huge panel of people talking through and championing and really celebrating the work that they have read. And I remember for myself, there were a few instances where I just wanted to celebrate that person so deeply, and they had checked the box saying no feedback, and I was like, no! I want you to know. I want you to know that I'm your biggest fan right now. And I think that is important to understand about the panelists approaching, again, the work, how it spoke to the fullness of our human experiences as well as artists, and carving out the time to be immersed. For me, Javier spoke to like the checking of the boxes that were like meeting the requirements, right? And the splitting of hairs. And that is so important. And I know, because I was reviewing in the literary spaces, that the artist statement as well as the work itself, if there wasn't if you didn't hit every box, but that artist statement or that proposal gave me a sense for why this work had to exist in the world and the risk that was being taken, that I was like, okay, all right, I didn't have the budget line right here, but like this thing is essential. It's going to change the world. And I got to read this. So anyway, I'm getting excited. Who's going next?
Just go ahead.
I guess my process is sort of like, just in terms of logistically, I like to kind of take a big like inhale of all of it to sort of get the tone of the vibe of what is going to be coming at me, and like where, like, sort of orienting myself, and in like you said, like Javier spoke to, just the context, and of where, where people are coming from, and and then just going with my gut in terms of like what grabs me, and then I sort of dive deeper into the work. So I guess I would say I start more on the, because I usually am looking at visual art, or performance or film or whatever, and which is different than like reading stuff, because reading stuff, you have to read all of it in the same way. So um yeah, so I think that's kind of like a general intake, and then um if something is really like popping to me, then getting more into the story, or I want to know what the story is behind this, and then I usually am interested in the statement, not so much the CV, just to be totally honest. I mean, that's more of a curiosity for me, like, oh, are you, is this person, have they had lots of shows, or, but it's not a criteria for judging the work necessarily. I am definitely not a box ticker kind of person. Have no earth signs in my chart. I'm just like, so I actually have to do, that's my labor actually, is sometimes I have to remember that, like, there are things you need to follow. And it was funny, I was paired with I can't remember what her name was, but she and I were on the team. She was the person who had the dance company in Boston, and she was so meticulous about budget lines, and I mean, we couldn't have been more different in our intake, but we really agreed on a lot of the work, and it was so much fun, like kind of ping ponging back and forth, because what she was looking at was real organization of line items and stuff. So that's another thing to consider, is that it's just everyone's different on the panel. And so if you are, I mean, not to be crass, but I have a good friend who does arts organization, consultation, and consultation for artists, and she just says, just keep applying, because you never know when it's going to be your year of bozos. Like, it's always a bunch of bozos, and is it your bozos, or is it not your year of bozos? And that's like a very good thing to keep in mind, that, it's all human and all fallible. So that's kind of my take on it, I guess.
Such great advice, Jibs. I really, really love that, because it's a bunch of folks that are bringing the best of their knowledge and experience with guidance from foundation staff to try and decipher what the best set of recommendations can be. And it's almost an impossible task. And it is the process that we have ahead of us in these panels. To get back to your question, Hollis, similar to Reina, I always am going for the inspiration. And so I always start with the work samples. I want to be moved by the work. I want to be excited by the work. I want to be curious about the work. And that allows me then, I typically go from work sample to an artist statement in order to really then begin to contextualize myself in the work, the intended purpose, the intended messaging, and any intended context that an artist might want to provide. And then I'll go to the additional materials, whether it's the proposal questions or the CV or the resume. Those are additional layers that are helpful and useful, but not usually what's going to get me excited about a piece. It's just not the way that I process information. It is, at the end of the day, about the actual art. And I always want to center that in the way that I review and participate in panels. But that's just my way. And I just want to reinforce, that everybody does it differently.
Yeah, thank you. And I think sometimes it's helpful in those moments of applying, right, to envision the panelists as a lineup of clowns would be helpful in just bringing some lightness in to that part of the process, which I think can be intimidating when you might not know who the panelists are. You might envision them as this kind of abstract thing. Even if you've had many successes, if you've received an individual artist award and you're tuning in today, I know it's a mix of both people who have received awards and those who are hoping to apply in the future. And I would say, even if you've received awards, that every time you apply, you never know. So I really appreciate all of these wonderful comments. So I kind of want to turn from this background and sort of how we approach panels to thinking a little bit about words of wisdom. And I know some of you all, we've had some email exchanges and we've had some conversation a little bit prior to getting started today. But I guess I'd be interested to talk first actually about those artist statements, since they've come up a number of times as a place where people are starting and getting excited about an artist's work or feeling that's a really important part of the application. And for you, what is it about an artist statement that captures your imagination, amplifies that sense of wonder you were talking about, Raina, gets you really inspired and excited? What is it about those artist statements that gets you jazzed?
I can start again. This seems like the thing. We're going to disrupt this next time. But what gets me excited in the artist statement is not jargon. It's not telling me who you know. It's not even telling me who you're in relationship to as far as like your work. That's cool to give me some other context. But it is telling me a story about the risk that you're taking in your art, and what drives you to have to create. And there are artist statements that stay with me actually months later, of folks telling their stories and saying, this is what it costs, for not so much it costs like monetarily, but if this is the risk that I'm taking, this is the life story that is seeping into my work, and I must create. The worlds are ending and worlds will begin, but I must be a part of holding this image forth. And yes, I'd like to learn about how people approach their work and the media that they're exploring in some ways, but also the techniques that they're exploring. But ultimately, if they can tell the story of the urgency of creation, then I'm moved, I'm in, and that helps to give me an understanding. That also said, I think that it's a great piece to, in that artist statement, give context for the limitations of resources, give context for the cultural knowledges, spiritual knowledges that are informing the work, that will push me to also do work, because there may be things in a work sample that I don't have access to automatically. It's not a part of my experience, but because of that artist statement, I know that I need to do some work. I need to read up a little bit and then go to that work sample. And you can ask that of me. You can trust me that if you tell me enough about the context and what's informing this, I'm going to do the work because I want to know. And I think that that's important for you to also, for folks as artists, to have an understanding of the panelists on the other side, is that we want to take care and learn. And that's not everybody's experience, especially as a writer and being a writer of color in many spaces and having to be called upon to explain my existence, let alone my work. That is, you don't have to, at least for me, my experience has been like, give me a hint and I'll go. I'll go on the journey. And the artist statement can allow me to do that.
Yeah, I think I would totally agree. I want to know why the work matters in the world, whether it's to you or to others. I mean, I think some of us will create just for ourselves as a processing tool, as a mode of expression. But so much about artistic practice or cultural practice is about being in relationship to community or society and a response to that work and what you're hoping to inspire. And so I think that balance in an artist statement of sort of what drives you, why do you create, what's the purpose, and how do you see your work living in the world and inspiring in the world is really helpful. But I think that Raina started us off with the most important piece. No jargon, use plain language. Talk to me like I'm a human, like I'm your child, and really just use words that help me understand what's inside of you. Because I think the flowery language ends up feeling a little academic. It ends up feeling a little sterile, and can make it difficult to really connect with the work when it's too overly complicated.
Yeah, this is a great question. And yeah, I would echo what my esteemed colleagues have already said. Like I think this, I mean, this sounds a little bit reductive maybe, but like being honest about what it is that is interesting to you is enough. Like it's enough. You're enough. Your idea is enough. Um, and if it's not enough to get you the thing you want, you know, that's okay. Like maybe you need to dig deeper or something like that. But like if the what's at the core of your compulsion to create, you know, you can just talk about what's that core about. And, you know, like was stated before, it could be something that has to do with, you know, the outer world or change in like a more broad way, or if it's just like exploring things within yourself, or like, I mean, thinking about what if you're really tactile and you love to make sculpture and you feel a certain way about, you know, like physicality when you're creating something with your hands, and like I want to know that stuff much more than I want to know, you know, what you think it should, like if what an art critic would say about it or something like that. Like I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is that like ultimately we want to just have space to tell our stories, and you know, knowing that there is a world where your story is enough and you don't have to like make things up, or you know, getting help to frame it is always like great. You know, I believe in like help all the time. Helping others and getting help is a huge part of this whole process. But you know, that's something I've had to learn over and over again, is just keeping it simple and keeping it honest, and not trying to you know, going inside. And sometimes that can be actually the hardest thing to do, is just be honest about why you're into something. That's what I have to say.
Thanks. I think just reflecting back some of the things that were said, you know, this idea of honesty and urgency, and, you know, that really telling a story. And I love this phrase that you said, Javier, using words that tell me what's inside you, which I think really gets to that idea of honesty, and also the urgency, why it needs to come out, why this opportunity is important. And, you know, I think the next question I have is sort of similar, but it's also distinct. I think when submitting to an application as an artist, you know, you have this artist statement, but then there's sometimes another piece of writing that you have to submit. That's like, here's what I'm going to do with this money or this opportunity, you know, whether it be the individual artist awards or another opportunity, a residency, or a fellowship, or an opportunity to publish your work, you know, as a chapbook under this publisher. You know, I think these are, you have to write something else. And I wonder if you could speak to what makes a good project statement, and how you distinguish it from the artist statement in your lens as a panelist. Maybe we can take the mic off Raina first. We can let someone else go first.
Tibbs, you want to go first, or do you want me to jump in?
You go ahead, Javier.
Okay. So as I think about a project statement versus an artist statement, the artist statement is about helping me understand who you are and your artistic practice, sort of period. It's the story of your life and your artistic passion and commitment. The project statement, I think, helps me locate myself. It's the GPS of where this project fits in your life, where this particular work fits in a continuum of the work that you've created, meaning how did you get here? And how did that work before you arrived to this project inspire this work? And where do you think this work will take you from here? Why is this work now helping you move into something that you want to do? And so I think that's how I would situate the distinction. One is the story of you, and one is the GPS of this work in your life. Not to be reductive, but.
Yes, ditto. So clear. I also think just in, that same, like sometimes the questions, the answer really is in the question for me when I say, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. And then what would I actually do with that? Like, what actually would I do with that? And really just getting down to the bare bones of what it actually is in reality to create something. But I really like the idea that, yeah, we want to see, like, is this next iteration of your work, pushing you forward, or does it seem like maybe it needs a little more thought in terms of like it's not really like moving you forward, or it just it seems like maybe a repeat of something, I'm not a growth project, more like something that you've already kind of been through. But yeah, keeping it simple and being in reality, with there were a lot of applications where artists didn't pay themselves, and the reality of that is like, I mean, treating it like even if you treat it like a minimum wage job, that's still a job that you need to pay yourself hourly for. So all of that time breakdown, materials breakdown, rent, all that stuff is really important. So and I actually really like doing that work now. I used to hate it, but I think it's kind of fun now to break it all down.
So I'll add to Jib's, please pay yourself. Please pay yourself. And I recall there were a number of applications that were also in the space of like, yo, if I get this, my whole community's rising. We all gonna get it. Which I also love celebrating, right? Like the vision for a whole community is a part of this. And what I recall seeing in at least one of those was that the person had a vision for how they can be in collaboration with other folks to make a vision happen. And then they forgot about them. They forgot about the central person who was envisioning all of this. And I just remember that piece of like, I really want you to pay yourself. Like, you are worthy. You are worthy. And you gotta keep the lights on. Like, lights are expensive. I also I love what Javier said about where this work will take you, and how telling us a little bit about the work before and this vision for what will come after. And there's also space for doing something wildly different. That you can say, like, I did these projects and I learned these skills from this, and I'm not doing anything like that, but I'm using these skills for this other thing. And I think that's also where the CV comes in, of like, oh, you have this incredible vision. Let me look at that CV to make sure that that vision can actually happen. And in the project proposal, saying to, why now? Why now? What will change for you in your career, in your work, in the essence of opening up doors of connection, whatever it is for your vision, for your work, with getting this Rasmussen right now. And I think that that is something that I saw of folks making applications stronger when they had a clear vision of like, this is my time. Like, you are my bozo. Like, so that understanding of like, okay, I know what this can open for me. That said, you may not know what this can open for you. And I think that that's an opportunity to connect with the Rasmussen staff of like, I'm thinking that this might be great. Like, do you have contact information? Maybe I should talk to somebody about that whole process and what maybe opened up for them as a result, because you just might not have. My understanding too of Alaska is communities are so spread out and some are so isolated that having an understanding of like interconnectedness and network and like all that is something that not everyone has immediately, right? So being connected with someone to talk about their experience and what changed might also inform your emerging vision for what you want for your work. Yeah.
Sorry, I was wrestling with the toggle button there. Thank you. Well, I feel like if I'm already feeling jazzed to just like, I've got to sit down and write an application to something. These are such inspiring words. I think some of the things that came up in that discussion were this notion of a kind of GPS of where this fits into your life is a kind of nice way to think about this compass, that it also where it fits into your life now as having momentum to propel you forward. And then also this notion of being in reality, which is both around money and yourself as a part of the application. I think were all really powerful things that were brought up in that section. I have one, often a packet includes some sort of personal statement, some other kinds of paperwork like CVs and resumes, a project statement, and then also work samples. And I wonder if you all could talk a little bit about what makes a strong work sample packet? What gets you, especially some of you talked about starting there, when you open up that packet, what is it that makes you go like, oh, wow, like I'm so excited to learn more about this project or this artist or why this opportunity is right for this person now? Go for it, Jibs.
Well, I would say like from the get, like just really trying to, and this is like a logistical thing, can you be seen? Can you be heard? Is your work clear? And not that it has to be fancy pants or anything like that, but just giving yourself the dignity of documentation that looks and sounds like it can be taken in. And that is something that I feel like sometimes requires outreach, which can be scary. Getting someone to film you or take photographs, and that can be expensive, but there's always like, that would be like something that, for example, reaching out to the foundation and, or whoever and saying like, do you have any resources, or getting friends to trade, just making sure that you are documented properly is really important. And that's where I'll start. That was the first thing that popped in my head. I'm sure there's more, but I'll let everybody else talk.
Okay. Thanks, Javier. I think the work sample should, for someone who's literary in the space of like delighting in the richness, deliciousness of metaphor, an image that is highly evocative, or those within a sample, definitely invite me into a different understanding of the world. And I love to read them. I also have loved to read work samples that connect to the artist statement or the project proposal, so that I have a deep understanding of, especially the project proposal, of like, oh, you're already doing this a little bit, like, even if it's not finished. And that's one thing that I think was helpful to also see of those writers who had written a little bit of a sample that connected to the project proposal. And they were also like, so I'm just going to give you that little taste. And then I have this other thing that is as celebrated in these other things that I'm really proud of this. This shows my particular skill set in fiction or nonfiction or poetry. And so I want to give you a taste of things that I have felt very confident in. And this is a sample of the project because you can do that. You can combine things within the page limit. So that's something to also think about for my literary folks is like, okay, do I have to have a sample that's like all cohesive and it only fits in connection with the project proposal? You make that what you need it to be and make the strongest case for like inviting people into the wonder, into the excitement, into the thing that you're so passionate about. And I also think that in composing your work sample, Jibs has spoken a lot about collaboration and calling on your network and your people. I totally echo that of calling on your people to read your sample and saying, if you read this sample like this alone, would you like me? would you want to come to my reading and hear me read this? Or is there something else, or like a question that you have that's not answered by this or something like that? But really tapping into your people so that you're not in the echo chamber of yourself, right? So.
And I think I would just add, I think it always will depend on your medium. I think asking for someone to review in advance is really important, and make sure that that person loves you enough to tell you the truth. Because I think all too often we surround ourselves with people, with our hype men and women and people who want to support us and cheerlead us. And that's important. And when you're applying for resources, it's really critical that someone is willing to say, all of this is great, and I think you might be able to strengthen this way. You know, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for are a couple. I want to be moved. It's an emotional, instinctual thing. It's an invitation that you're giving me to learn, to want to learn more, or to feel connected to you in a way that I may not be able to necessarily describe. But I'm looking for either clarity of photos and sound. I'm looking for literature that is inspiring, that raises questions for me, or that's troublesome. And I'm just like, wait, where are you going? What's going on? And so the best metaphor I can give you is, we're all constantly competing for information. Information overload is happening everywhere we go. And so you need to think about, what is the headline summary I can give somebody? What is the thing that will grab them? Essentially, you may want to consider, no matter what medium you're in, if you're going down a shopping district, what is it you're putting in the window to entice me to go into the store? And that's what I think your images do, is that they help me understand the context of what's inside. And they're going to excite me to want to go in and explore. I know that may feel rather abstract because there are some basic things. For those of you that are taking, 2 or 3D images, you know how to take a good photo. But we also know that images can be challenging in rural communities that don't have access to broadband. And so finding ways to ask for support in the way that Jib started, I think, is going to be really important to determine, can you find somebody that can take those photos, that had access to the broadband, that can get them up for you? Or is there another way to generate those images? Beyond that, I think everything else is, largely a music, audio, video file that, again, bandwidth I know is going to be an issue, but choosing the right segment, I think, is really critical. You have to, if it's film or music, you're choosing that sizzler, you're choosing that moment that's going to hook me and get me excited about learning more. So I'll stop there.
Yeah.
I would just also say briefly that this would be something that would be an appropriate thing to reach out to the foundation that's or the grant or whatever, just say, here's my circumstances, I'm trying to get this documentation, do you have any ideas? That, I know that Rasmussen would be like, yes, we can help you. But that doesn't always seem like a possibility in terms of, it seems a little bit opaque. But that would be a question, I think, also, if you're having any kind of accessibility issue, because that's really on the organization. to really consider all of the accessibility issues. And I feel like Rasmussen really did a great job, like hearing about how hard y'all work to take into consideration the environment, the socioeconomic stuff, the, you know, all the landscape that you're actually in, the reality, you know, being in reality. So yeah, I would say reach out to the organization.
Can I add this one thing to the compelling piece around work sample, is around reaching out to your people, but not just the people who do things like you. So having folks who are artists or not artists to review your work sample, because ultimately, yeah, we review in our areas of specialization, and then ultimately by the end, we're looking at everything. And I think that for me, when I got to the end of the process and being able to like see someone's musical composition and or hear it and watch someone's film and be like, this is incredible. Y'all are these panelists and then these things, and I'm just swept away by this work sample, and like this is totally outside of my discipline, totally. But I am moved. It is clear what this person wants to do, is doing, has a vision for. And so like having your people who are not in your discipline to look over and to give you some feedback may also help to replicate the experience of a panelist who's not in your discipline.
Yeah, these are all really great points. We talked about ideas of getting help, whether that's from your colleagues, friends, loved ones who are honest with you, as well as the organization that you might be applying to, that it can feel intimidating to reach out, but it is upon the organization, some of these access and logistical issues that you might be running into in compiling your application, and being honest and transparent about those, and seeking support being important. And then also editing, really taking a keen eye to editing what samples you provide to ensure that they are the strongest, most enticing component of your work. One of the questions that came up is around this idea of work samples that are really maybe different than your artist statement or project statement. And Raina, you addressed this a little bit, that you might put a specific piece in that shows your strength, and then maybe if you're going to move in a really radically different direction, to provide a smaller sample that says sort of, this is me, this is the beginning of my process, entering into that other space that I'm going to be experimenting in with this particular area. And then I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that on that note of sort of when you're taking a risk as an artist, in terms of maybe jumping into uncharted waters, and you don't have work samples that are going to show that background because you don't have it.
I might jump up. Oh, go ahead, Reina.
No, go ahead, Javier. Go ahead.
One of the things, I think Reina really hit on these pieces earlier of how would I decipher that? And so again, understand I'm trying to decipher as best as possible. So I'm relying on your application to tell me a story. So what I would say is, if you work in a particular medium and you want me to understand how you make sure that what you're doing is at the top of your craft, however it is that you define that, then you can link pieces of information from your resume or CV to your artist statement, to some samples of, I took all of these courses, I did all of this practice, and here's where I land, where I think it's really great. Now, when you issue your project plan, you can say, now here's how I will chart a similar journey. Here's the curriculum, here are the tools, here are the partners, here are the resources that I will use. And I'm not there yet, but then here's a sample of where I'm starting. And so it's important for me to understand that you're going to see something all the way through, and what process do you typically take to see something all the way through to a high quality finish, so that I can understand, great, fine, you want to go somewhere else, no problem, but I need to have a comparison. If you just submit some of the new early work that you're working on, and I can't tell from your CV whether you're taking the artistic practice rigorously and making sure that you're working with elders or going through formal training of some sort for yourself, either through post-secondary education or otherwise. I think I'm agnostic, because I think a lot of people learn by doing and learn by studying, whether it's in or outside of school. But yeah, it's helping me understand what will your process be and giving me a sense of where do you normally land, where you think something is great.
I would also add that, yeah, I like that trajectory sort of foundation idea that Javier just explained. But I would also add just trying to ask yourself conceptual questions about how does this work tie in with your previous work, and how, if it's not materially or visually or sort of narratively in line, how is it conceptually in line, and how is it pushing you forward sort of in your own deepening of your art and your creative practice? Because sometimes that's all it is, like I just or speaking to an experience you had while making work that sort of like inspired you to go to this different direction, and just being clear about that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, if you want to jump in, I'm also just sensitive to time and wanting to weave in. There's so many great questions coming in. There's one more that I wanted to address just about work samples, which is that someone got feedback that one year that a work sample was great, and then another year they got feedback this work sample was not great. And how do you kind of reconcile that experience? What's your guidance for artists when they are having that kind of conflicting, or maybe similarly you're shopping out your packet to some colleagues and loved ones, and one person's like, this, I love this one, and the other colleague's like, this one makes no sense to me. What are your thoughts about how to kind of move forward from something like that?
I think Jib really answered this for us earlier.
Yeah.
It might just not have been your bozo.
Yeah.
It might not have been your clown, because I've actually been in panels where literally it's the same panel. It's not even a different year. And somebody says something is great and somebody writes down that something is terrible. It's really difficult to decipher. And so my advice is twofold. Ask staff at the foundation what they think. They are the common thread across years. And I think that they're going to be able to decipher whether something is something that you should pay attention to, or whether something was unfortunately just like a one-off comment, because panelists see the world through their own unique human lens. And that might help you temper, what you pay attention to. But beyond that, I would say it's a matter of, unfortunately, it's apply and apply again. And to Reina's point earlier of thinking about who are those diverse people that are giving you feedback prior to application, so that you're trying to get who might be the outlier and what are they paying attention to that nobody else is paying attention to, that also might be helpful for you to try and avoid those scenarios that can be really confusing. But I have to admit that happens more often than not.
That's such a good insight. What about people applying as a group? So a lot of times foundations or organizations, whether it be the Rasmussen, are restrict to an individual applying. But what about when you're a group applying? That is something that the Rasmussen has recently made possible in the Individual Artist Award process. And do you have advice for folks who are a collective or a pair? Jibs, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I can speak to that because I just had applied as a group I've been applying to Creative Capital since I was in my diapers. So many rounds, so many, just forever. And I got the award in 2020, which was like so amazing. Thank you. You all know it's like this sort of beacon of like all of these, I don't know, it felt very validating, but I also, I was also really taking into account like what they're looking for and just sort of trying to see not like to change my work necessarily, but does my work are they granting the kind of things that I'm interested in doing right now? And from what I understood, the projects that they were more interested in were bigger. They were more sort of they had a lot more like public interaction or social sort of I don't want to say okay, I'll start over. So what I think was really helpful for me and my collaborator was talking about our relationship as artists and how we were different and what happens when we come together. There is like this magic fusion, and she stands really strongly in what she does, and I stand really strongly in what I do. But neither of us know how to do what either of us do. And how do we complement each other? How do we make something greater than the individual? How does the whole become greater than the individual project? And I think for me, I apply a lot with performance work that's like usually it's solo. I work with a lot of people. Sometimes I hire folks and like collaborate, but I'm directing it, I'm writing it, I'm like the steerer of the ship, so to speak. And when I applied for this last project, it was just a lot more about more exploration and more about how we could make each other more in like excite. I was excited about what was possible for me with this other thing and like just being available for that. So that was, I think that helped a lot in terms of getting people excited about it as well. Just saying like, this is what she does. Isn't this cool? This is what I do. Imagine like the cuisine, the 4-course meal, or that, the explosion that can happen out of these two, very interesting artists. So that's kind of, I think, also got me really excited too. So I think, and that's where I really think that the real fire lies actually is where when you can see how someone is so excited about something they want to do.
Yeah, such great thoughts about that getting excited yourself when you're applying. I think too is can be really hard. These applications can be very time consuming and onerous, and you can get kind of lost in the weeds of them. But that reminder to find your own sense of wonder, maybe lay your space, get your own essential oil humidifier going to get that sense of excitement. Some other questions that are coming up in the chat are two about timelines. I'm kind of lump them together. What about variable timelines? What about, I think both if you've received something and like timelines are shifting, what do I do? And or when you're applying, I think we've all in the past 2 years come to recognize so much is uncertain. How do you predict that timeline with a variety of different factors that might be moving parts, and and I think most importantly, maybe what does a panelist want to see in a timeline? And I think that might address both of those questions in a specific way.
For me, for a timeline, I want to see that someone has thought through what the current reality is, and can say, here are the resources available, here's what the landscape is, and here are the reasonable steps that I can take towards project completion. And as to like, for me as well, I want to see that someone has a vision for actually getting it done. Like that it's not going to be just a start and like, and I'm gonna change the world with this one thing, but change it in 6 months or whatever it is, right? But like, you don't have to do everything. You don't. You can just focus on the one thing that's going to maybe build to the next thing and build to the next thing, but you don't have to do everything and like try and do it in a very short amount of time. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Recognize that our our timelines do change, and there are overlapping understandings of time and different commitments, especially for my caregiving folk. There may be like, my time is such that I don't know about my time because schools may close. My kids have been out of school for 10 days right now. And that changes a lot of things, And I think that in the project proposal too, as well as an artist statement, you can also be honest about that. I have a vision and this is life. And this foundation will help me to achieve this vision. And I also recognize that there's life. So I appreciate honesty as a panelist myself, and what a foundation, what a grant can open up. So.
Definitely. I'll just say, being on the other side and working with artist fellowships and residencies, if your timeline is shifting, I just want to know. I want you to reach out to me right away and say, this is what I'm foreseeing or what's going on. If depending on the funding agency or the residency or the opportunity, they might have different processes around that, where you might need to resubmit some parts of your application or something like that. But it just depends on the organization. So I'm wanting to make this broader than just the Rasmussen in response that I know from here at the museum with fellowships and things like that. If we have an artist in residence whose timeline's changing drastically, or the project is changing in a way that they couldn't have foreseen, just to let us know, because we want to be in conversation, and foundations and grant making organizations want to be supportive of artists. Yeah.
I just want to point out also that, to echo both of you on that, this is kind of woo-woo out of nowhere, but I was thinking about like this person I know who's a psychic, and what she would say was like, all right, this is what I see right now, but it's all subject to change. Like this is what, and just like, so when you're approaching your application, think about it as, in a realistic ideal world, like, you don't have to explain that everything is, subject to change, because that's really like, we all kind of know that as adults. And now, especially, I mean, my project that I was supposed to be working on for that grant I was talking about has totally gone down the toilet. It's completely changed. I mean, in a good way. It's really good. It's like it was meant to be what it is now, and that's like beautiful, but it was painful and really hard to give up on that trajectory, because of pandemic. But it is what it is, and being in conversation and being honest and keeping informing the people that want to support you, ultimately that is just a trusting that the people that are behind you with the granting and the residencies and such are want it to be the most fruitful for you, and aren't it like going forward without thinking that you're going to be punished all the time for every decision that you make is a good idea, I think.
Do we have time for maybe just two more questions? So the first one from the Ask a Question section is about just how were you oriented to Alaska? So what were the things that you knew? What did the Rasmussen share with you that helped you get oriented to thinking about applications in this place, which might also be a lens to applicants, what they might need to share if a foundation isn't so wonderful at orienting panelists. If you're applying outside of the Rasmussen, if you're applying to a non-state specific organization or opportunity, what would be helpful for the panelists to know about your context? And what was helpful for you, I guess, to know about Alaska's context?
Thank you. I've had the great fortune of traveling across the state. I've been all the way up to northwest area, Kivalina, through Kotzebue and Anchorage and other parts of the state, that I've really been able to understand that there are parts of the state that can feel really urban and feel a little dense, but still have infrastructure problems, and that there are areas where literally there is no public infrastructure, not even running water. And that's the reality of daily life. And so I think what I was excited about was I had that context coming into this. And then in the preparation for the panel, Rasmussen they went deep with us to help us understand the complexity of living in Alaska across a wide variety of communities. And that context, I think, was really great to level set a foundation so that everybody understood that as we were going into the review of the proposals. I think that when you are applying to anyone who doesn't have that great context, to your point, Hollis, I think making sure that you take 3 to 5 sentences in a paragraph to explain Alaska is not like any other place in this country. And making that really clear and being able to talk about a lack of infrastructure, a lack of access to broadband, how everything becomes more expensive because of where you are. And that, where a $10,000 award might go pretty far for some folks in parts of this country, it might not actually go that far for somebody in Alaska, because that same work might cost $25,000 because of the pure nature of the landscape and the infrastructure across the region. So I think it's a bit of, you have a great partner in Rasmussen, and know that you're going to have to explain that to some of us bozos across the country who don't understand the context.
That's so great. Yeah, Reina, and then I want to just move to one last question after Reina.
Let's move to the next question.
Okay. I'm just going to catch 2 of the questions that are in the Ask a Question that are kind of specific, and I'm just going to address them. The one is about a professional resume, and then another one is about timeline with the Rasmussen. So if I know one of the question askers is someone who's a grantee who's received an award. Our very next session is all about resumes and CVs. So come on to the January 11th one that's only for individual artist award recipients. But ask the foundation about or the organization, if they're wanting professional resume for some reason. Usually it's just your artist resume or CV, and note it. There's a distinction between those 2 things, a CV and a resume, and you should look that up. Or if you're an award winner, you can come to our next session, which will be all about that. The other question was about timeline and the Rasmussen specifically. That's a question to ask the Rasmussen Foundation directly, and questions like that in general, you can ask foundations directly about sort of very specific questions about your project timeline. The last thing I wanted to ask, is rejection. It happens. Sometimes we don't get the thing we wanted to get, and we worked really hard on an application. What's your advice for when you get that rejection? What now? What next?
So I think that it helps with rejection, at least for me, if I know that there's something else in the wings. I've worked really hard on this thing, and then I also at the same time submitted a manuscript here or some poems over here, and I did the grant over here, and all I'm doing at this point is keeping track. And then I get the feedback, I change the thing, and it becomes technical. It takes out, for me, the sorrow and the personal, like grieving and all that, because I definitely still have that as an academic, but I do not have that as an artist. Because I remember getting some of those initial rejections. I was like, I was fly. This thing was amazing. Like, they don't know. And then I didn't write for several months, right? And then I didn't create because I was like, they don't know, and nobody else will ever know. And I went into that real negative spiral space. But for me, a mechanism to defeat that inner critic is to just keep it moving, keep creating something. And if it's something that frustrates me in this area, well, I have other things I make collages. I'll tap on the keys, whatever. But just keep creating, because that's essential to who I am in the world, and my part in the world is as a creator, as a connector, as a community organizer, and like, we got to know who we are. And I think that too, that recognition of like who we are and affirming who we are can also, and also holding on to like, I didn't reach my bozo yet. Like my bozo wasn't on this. All these techniques can keep us moving. because you never know, right? The next thing comes in, and that's the thing that opens up for me. So I offer you that.
I just can't relate because I've never been rejected from anything. I've just gotten all the awards that I've ever applied for. So no, I just want to point out the story about Carolee Schneeman applied for Guggenheim, I think like 16 times. I probably exaggerate every time. It's part I also have heard this, you know, it's part of our job to just keep doing it. It's a almost like a administrative duty that we have to perform, just to keep applying and keep making work. Also, this idea that you know, and take what you like and leave the rest of this, but like the idea of like rejection is God's protection, and you know, like in terms of just it may not be the right time, maybe you need a little, you know, or maybe it's, you know, maybe that wasn't the right person for you, maybe like that, you know, in the broader sense, you know, like maybe that wasn't your maybe the universe has something better in mind or down the road. So I try to keep that in mind as well, and I really don't get bugged out anymore. I mean, I have to say it's been a long time, but I just sort of try to go where it's warm, as they say, and you know, keep applying for things, but don't try to push stuff upstream, you know. I mean, not to not work hard, but if you're knocking and knocking and knocking and you're just getting tired and frustrated and angry, you know, maybe the energy needs to go to something else, or the expectation needs to be dropped a little bit.
Okay, before you come in, Javier, I just have to say, like, y'all, if you haven't been making patches from everything that Jibs has said, like rejection is God's protection, yo. Don't try to push stuff upstream. Like, I feel like I need a jacket with patches on it to remind me. Just had to note that.
And I was just going to say ditto to everything that the two of you have said. I have nothing better to add. You've said it better than I could.
Sorry, toggle function is being a little wacky again. Well, I think those are all really powerful ways to think about that moment of rejection, and keep that vision of clowns if you need to, for that moment too. I just wanted, before we close, just to summarize. I feel like there were a couple of words that really stick with me. Be real. That there's a real sense of honesty and authenticity and also reality, that is a really strong part of making a great application. Be kind to yourself, and that looks like everything from budget and also how you respond to rejection. And then seek help and tap into your allies, whether that be the organization or others that might support you in these processes. And I just want to say thank you to Javier and Jibs and Reina for such beautiful and inspiring conversation. Like, seriously, if y'all aren't feeling like you need to start opening up some applications to fill out right now, I don't know. I know that we're a little over time, so I'll let them sign off, but I'll just close out with a few housekeeping notes. I want to thank the Rasmussen Foundation for the opportunity to host and facilitate this conversation today, from the museum, and this wonderful partnership that we're fostering to provide support here locally, for artists within the state, as opposed to outsourcing that, and really being able to be present for artists. And on that note, if you are an individual artist award recipient from this year's cohort, you get a 90-minute session with me. So we can look at an application and we can talk about a really specific question. I can review your work samples. We can talk about, or just where do I even start looking for some other opportunities? What might be next if this is my project or what I want to do? I'm glad to brainstorm or be really nitty gritty with you. So remember that you can reach out to me directly. I'll pop my email in the chat in a moment. if you're an applicant that's outside of that cohort, so someone who might be a future applicant to the Individual Artist Award program, there are lots of great resources on the Rasmussen website. And the Rasmussen itself is a wonderfully open organization in the application process. So I encourage direct outreach with specific questions about your application if you have them. I want to remind those who are in the cohort that our next meeting is all about writing your artist statement and CVs versus resumes and what they mean and what to do about that. And that is January the 11th. And it's with Riva Simcoe, who is at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and she's the chief curator there. And then we have a survey that we are going to pop in the chat, and we'll also email out to the Individual Artist Award cohort just for your feedback on today, so we can make sure that we continue to improve this program for you and others in the future. Yeah, just keep checking your syllabus and stay in community. I think that's like in these times, it's always hard to stay connected, whether there's a pandemic or not, with others who are your allies and friends. And don't hesitate to reach out to artists who you admire. One of my stories of coming to Alaska was that I cold emailed 2 artists that I had found on the Individual Artist Award website, and I thought their work was cool, and I was moving to Alaska, and I said, hey, I'm coming in 2 weeks. Can I get a coffee with you? And I show up, and I felt really scared to do it, but it really changed my experience here in Alaska. Now I've had the opportunity to show alongside those 2 artists and their dear friends. So I encourage you to find community in these times. So thank you for the community that today represented, everyone. And we'll go ahead and close out. This link becomes a recording. So if you want to, this is a link that you can share with others. Or if you want to go back and listen to some of those quotes, if you get a rejection letter, I encourage you, play this back. And there are some pearls of wisdom about how to lift up endorsing all sorts of woo-woo activities to support your own sustained practice. So thank you so much, everyone, today, and we'll go ahead and close out. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.